Hey, what's up guys? Alex here with a new video, and today we're going to be doing a comparison between the Sony A7 III and the Canon EOS R, and we're going to find out if eye autofocus is really worth the hype. Now let's get real. The Sony blows the Canon out the water. Like, it's just plain and simple. The Sony can detect the eye 10, 15 feet, 20 feet away. It can even detect animals' eyes. The technology behind the Sony camera is far beyond any other camera in the market. It is truly impressive. Now the Canon can detect the eye realistically if you're within portrait distance, right? What does that mean? 5, 6, maybe 7 feet, pushing it. But beyond that, it just tracks the face. You get a nice little square in the face. Now, when you're shooting portrait distance, the eye is very important. It's crucial, and both cameras do a phenomenal job at those distances. But the real question is, does eye autofocus really matter when you're 5, 10, 15 feet, 20 feet away? So I decided to make this video. Let's go ahead and roll the B-roll. Alright, so that video proved the initial point, right? The Sony can detect the eye very impressively. Crazy distances. The technology and their algorithm, again, is amazing. But let's go ahead and go in a little deeper and take a look at these files. Before we dive in, two things, because it's going to come up. Fairness. Now, I got blown up with this on my Fuji comparison. When I compare cameras, I compare them with their native mount lenses, which means in this case, I used the top of the line 50mm on the Canon and the top of the line 50mm on the Sony. Why 50? It's my favorite focal length right now. Plain and simple. Now, it's not my fault if the manufacturer, I'm not saying Sony or Canon, 'cause they're pretty comparable here, but like Fuji or Nikon, it's not my fault if they don't offer the same type of quality on their lenses or a higher end. This is just how I'm going to do all my comparisons moving forward. With that being said, second thing that's going to show in these pictures is there's a difference in color science. Now with both images, I applied my preset, I applied my look, I tried to get them to match as close as possible. It was really difficult. They just rendered differently. So don't necessarily look at the colors because they are going to be different. We're going to be looking at eye autofocus, if it really makes a difference, if it really nails the subject, and what if the sharpness of the lens is more important? We'll take a look. So with that being said, let's dive in. Okay guys, let's go ahead and get started. Now on the left hand side we have the Canon, on the right hand side we have the Sony. For the rest of this comparison, we're going to keep it that way. So the left will always be Canon and the right will always be Sony. Again, try to ignore the colors. I try to get them to match as close as possible, but I couldn't. So let's just not pay too much attention to that. Let's go ahead and zoom in here 2:1 on both images. And as you saw in the B-roll, the Sony always picked up the eye. Sony's autofocusing algorithm is so freaking good. It always picks up the eye. I don't know how they do it. But one thing we're going to see here is, even though the Sony knows where to focus, and the Canon just has a box over the face, that doesn't really substitute for lens sharpness or focusing accuracy. I think that's the most underrated thing about the Canon EOS R is just how well it's calibrated to its lenses. It's just, I think it's out of this world, and I'd be curious to see if we were to get Sony's tech with Canon's kind of lenses and calibration. But let's go ahead and zoom out here. You can see this image, the Canon is definitely sharper. Let's go ahead and move on to the second one. Again, guys, we have the Canon here on the left, so it has 2:1, and the Sony on the right, 2:1. and a little bit of the same thing, where the Sony was focusing on the eye, knows where to focus, and the Canon was just focusing on the face. The Canon's still a sharper image. Now we're going to go to this third image, and this one's a little bit trickier and I think very interesting as well. On this third image, what was really interesting about it was both cameras did a really good job tracking the subject, but here, and I wasn't really expecting this kind of caught me off guard, the Sony Zeiss lens does such a good job handling the light coming from the left. It just, I mean, it has more contrast, it's not faded. I mean, it overall just held up better to the light versus the Canon, it has more of a hazy look. And what's interesting is the Canon lens is a newer lens. It does have all the newer coatings, but the Sony just held up with more contrast. Now, when you zoom in, again, both lenses did pick up focus accurately. The Sony was picking up the eye, the Canon was picking up the face. And here, you can see how the Canon lens is a little softer because of that light hitting it, right? It's a hazy image. The Sony did have more contrast. It's still a soft image, but it just held contrast better. And I thought that was kind of interesting when looking at both these lenses. But as far as the images go, again, kind of just proving the point over and over again, right? Let's go ahead and go to another one. Same thing here as the previous one. The Sony just had better contrast, but when you focus in at 2:1 on the face, my wife's gonna hate me for being so close to her face here on YouTube, but it is what it is. You just see that, again, it doesn't necessarily matter that the camera knows the eye is here if the lens is gonna be softer or if the focusing accuracy won't be there. You can see how much sharper the Canon is, and it wasn't necessarily picking up the eye. And for the last image, guys, I think it's just a summary of everything we've seen. So you zoom into the Canon here, it's a sharp image. Now this image does suffer a little bit from that haze, right? That light hitting from the background. It does haze up the image, and even though the photo's sharp, you kind of get those side effects, right? Whereas the Sony, finally we have a super sharp image. And again, it's contrastier. It does better with the backlight than the Canon lens does. But this goes to show you that the Canon wasn't picking up the eye necessarily all the time like the Sony was. Even though Sony's algorithm is better and can pick up the eye, that doesn't necessarily mean you're going to have better or sharper images. It still comes down to the lens. And a lot of people always ask me with a Canon, what focusing settings do I use? I always just use face detect and kind of trust the camera. And it's never done me wrong. I've never had an image where the nose is clearly in focus and the eye isn't. So I think the technology, maybe the processors in the Canon cameras aren't quite there. Maybe Sony does have a step up ahead there, but in the end, the sharper lens won in every single one of these images, even though the camera wasn't picking up the eye. Okay, there you have it. So in short, the Sony has better technology. It is leaps and bounds, I think, better than any other manufacturer right now with their AI, with their algorithms detecting the eyes in humans and animals. And it's truly, I think, one of the most impressive pieces of camera tech to come out in the last 10 years. But in the end, what you see here is Canon's lenses are sharper. And when you get to a certain distance, IAF doesn't really matter. The focal plane is the same at a certain distance for the subject, whether it's the eyelash, the eyebrow, or the eye. When you're a certain distance, it doesn't matter as much. And what really kind of kicks in there is the quality and the sharpness of the lens. So in this case, at a distance, IAF didn't really make much of a difference because the Canon lens was sharper. Hopefully you enjoyed this video. As always, please like this video, please subscribe, and I will see you on the next one. Have a good one. Peace.